Isn't it? Evening, everyone. Welcome to the January meeting of Corporate Services and Cost of Living Scrutiny Review Board. We'll get straight into it with item 1. Any apologies?
Councillor Cole.
Councillor Cole, thank you. Don't think we've got any others. Item 2, late items, none from me. Declarations of interest, item 3. Anybody? Item 4, minutes of the last meeting held on 21st of November. There was just one takeaway from that meeting relating to a possible request around marketing Derby, which I had a chat with officers on, and we did take the view that it wouldn't really be in the remit of this committee to have an update come forward from marketing Derby. So other than that, everyone happy with the minutes of the meeting? Great. So that takes us on to item 5, which is an update on the artificial intelligence program, which I think Andy, you're delivering for us.
Thank you, Chair. 1 second to. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this update. So as members will be aware, the council have been undertaking an AI transformation program for probably around approaching two years now. This update is to provide members on status on progress of that, achievements of that, and the direction of where on next. Just seem to be advancing. I'm joined by colleagues Lee Haynes, who's heading digital enablement and automation, and is leading technically on the program, and Keely Freeman, the projects and change, who is the overall program manager for the AI program. And as you'll know, Ralph Pearson, I am performing the role of the deputy SRO for the program. Chief executive being the overall SRO leading on the program. So quick recap and reminder, introducing that conversational AI piece within Derby. We were coming out of a period probably of around 10 years within the local government sector of moving all services online, deliverable through web type services. We got to a point where we were very in a position where everything was available. We had a situation where around 60 people of transactions that were coming into the council from citizens, where citizens were expressing a preference to actually use telephone conversations. So wanting to speak to a human colleague, work in that more traditional way that we used to over many years. So there was an opportunity there to be able to give a more joined up digital and automated and wider available experience, while still people being able to retain that human to human type telephone based communication method. So we looked at how we could actually develop new services that allow people to continue with the orders automated 24/7 delivery. So in April 2023 and May 2023 respectively, having worked for several months on building these products, we delivered Darcy and Ali being a web bot and a telephone automation AI. In its web form, allowed people to much more easily and more readily get benefit from the website-based services which navigate and ask what was required, and they quickly divert to that service, not necessarily go hunting for it. And the second one, which in May, was putting that same service into the voice sphere, such that anyone remembering the council would be answered by the same AI, and a conversation had to actually understand what the need was and divert that as the question of the human body if required. And we were the first council in the UK to actually do this in the very much pioneering space. And that's been very successful. Gave council the company actually supercharged version leveraging actually give wide service and give a lot more detailed responses to citizens approaching the council. So thus far, Darcy and Ali have dealt with 765,000 phone calls and 81,000 website transactions, answering around 1.7 million questions. And the original business target for this was to actually be able to give 21% at 60% of telephone conversations, and that's been significantly over-delivered and is dealing with 44% currently, almost 45% because it continues to learn and get better and better over time. We delivered MTFP savings at that point through that automation by the reducing or eliminating the requirement to boost resources with agency resource. It continues to facilitate around 40 services, and in a very real way, we've seen the number of calls that our human colleagues have to deal with reduced by a real 40%, and of course that's the ability to reinvest that overachievement in supporting people with more complex queries and complex needs and more vulnerability, and it's allowed us to reconsider with approval from members what the service offer might be. So in the previous FTFP we took benefits from being able to keep the opening hours for more critical services as they were, and actually reduce the opening hours for services. As I mentioned a second ago, this success with the Darcy approach gave us the confidence to actually build on that program. We at the same time we were implementing Darcy and Ali. There was with that emergence of Gen AI, the council wanting to leverage that opportunity around AI, both in terms of MTFP and protecting services, developing services. We moved into a stage, our understanding what the art of the possible for that, building on the foundations we'd already established, and leveraging the generative AI that was emerging, and identify where the business cases were for that next stage of generative AI. And the council the previous summer had did an engagement with leads, from professional leads, frontline officers, heads of services partners from across the authority, to identify what the art of the possible for generative AI was. And in that process, we identified 261 use cases for AI, and we focused in on what were the most powerful use cases to get financial benefits out for the council, while protecting and preserving services. And in that first phase, was identified to focus on debt management and income management, internal automation in the form of a staff co-pilot, such that we could have a lot more efficient and automated way of advising and supporting colleagues. An adult social care external co-pilot, so assisting our social workers in being able to be much more productive, to be able to automate much of the heavy lifting, so that they can focus on the higher value complex needs. And service users, a customer services co-pilot, or a supercharged version of Darcy, which uplifted Darcy to a level where it could provide much richer information and actually answer a much wider range of questions, queries, and services, such was the advancement in AI. And this is where we are currently. I'll go into some more detail on the status of where all those are at the moment, but the plan was then to move into transformation phase 2, which starts to look at doing the same within the revenues and benefits space. A supercharged version of Ali, which is the Derby Owens version of the AI, looking to do the same within children's services and send services, and moving to adult social care, the internal automation and co-pilots to assist in the everyday work of social care colleagues. So, as far as the customers facing and wider council, internal facing side, the co-pilot, as I've just touched on, customer services, is a supercharged version generative AI enabled version of Darcy that will operate from within Derby Direct, but also bringing in a much wider range of services, including the adult social care front door, and it actually uses all the information that's available to the council, so its website, its internet site, its policies, its service descriptions, and wider information that we will point it to actually not just understand what the service user requires and give them a scripted answer or divert them to a service, but actually understand what they need and actually curate a solution based on the sum total of that knowledge it's got access to. So we should see a significant increase in its ability to deal with customer queries, and we're expecting that to raise significantly above the 44% of solutions that it can currently deliver. Similarly, that's principle for deploying within the wider staff or internal. So rather than being able to curate solutions to social care queries, for example, or taxation queries, or waste queries, this one deals with a vast range of queries that might might come into internal facing services. So democracy, for example, HR, procurement, legal, IT, all these services that currently necessitate the internet. Wait until an officer is available to actually ring back and give advice. This will be able to actually answer a lot more of those queries automatically. Again, leaving officers more available to deal with more complex issues. But it also, because AI, we recognised this very early on, we needed to be support and agile and accept that how we vision this on day one evolve, because the AI is advanced at such a rate. We've also on an ongoing basis recognised that there will be new opportunities or different ways of doing it as we go. It's one area of interest. As the technology evolved, as we were developing this, it gave us the ability to deploy a ChatGPT safe and secure version to every desktop within the council, such that everybody will be able to safely use ChatGPT to answer any question you could possibly conceive of, to actually do straightforward tasks like review large-scale documents and summarise them, to actually go away and do research for people, pull information together, write a report, and a million other different things that you could use ChatGPT for. But rather than it being externally facing, where you wouldn't be able to council data, this is protected within a environment, so it can't inform the development of either ChatGPT models, or it won't allow council data to leave the council, such that we wouldn't be able to control it. And the third element of this was the delivery of inbox management. So similar to Darcy and Ali, we have very large mailboxes where customer queries could come in and actually go through those, actually pass them to where they need to be dealt with. The AI will go through those large mailboxes much more quickly, filter them and pass them on to where they need to be, so it can be enacted. Where we are with that one is the customer service co-pilot is currently in testing. It's looking really good. That's being tested by a range of people, including community groups, accessibility and disability focus groups. Testing that as well. And to say that's looking really good. The inbox management is similarly tested by the wider council. It's known as Perry, which was voted on by colleagues, named after the Green Falcons on the cathedral. That's doing really well in testing, and we're expecting all these to be going into a live environment from mid February through the end of March. So we're using that now short time scale. The debt management or income management piece. This is delivering overarching debt management solution using AI, which will bring data together under a single dashboard. That's the main systems that the council uses. So we have that single view of the debt and information, such that we can analyse that technically, start to collect those large amounts of debt. So council banks, financial debt, business rates debt, etc., all social care debt, all moving together as one. That dashboard, start again. that debt dashboard, I can't pronounce it, has been delivered and is in active use by Scrutiny. And when we hit a stage where we're developing the technology that will then, as I mentioned earlier, ethically chase the debt and give debtors the ability to easily pay, which is well known within the sector, that giving that reminder an opportunity to pay is really powerful in helping people manage that debt. In the adult social care space, there's two key elements to that. There's the actual development of the adult social care co-pilot, which, as I mentioned earlier, does that heavy lifting around and takes the more straightforward tasks, not away from the adult social care, but actually will carry them out and then bring them back for approval to the colleague. And so it will answer straightforward queries. It will understand care needs. It will be pre-care evaluations for everything comes back to the social worker for approval. It just does that heavy lifting work. And the parallel part of that is adult social care reviews. So one of the key outcomes of the social care co-pilot is to support colleagues in being able to more regularly do social care reviews. Historically, there's been a challenge actually finding the resources to do regularly, because it actually protects people doing doing key work, but they don't get around. So part of the project was to actually bring resources in to actually gain benefit from doing those reviews in advance of the AI being built. One, for the purposes of bringing those savings, other benefits of having up-to-date reviews forward in the programme. But secondly, and almost as important for the programme, to actually provide the learning such that the machine learning could be imparted to the AI, so the AI can take over that going forward and keep those benefits within the council. The adult social care co-pilot for web, so the front door, is currently in testing, as is the telephone version of that. The upgraded Darcy Alley. The actual social care reviews, there's been some challenges in this space, including availability of resources within the sector to actually assist the council in doing that, but we've had to meet the challenge for. And similarly, and as we expected along the way, because we were doing something that had never been done before, we recognised there would be issues that we had to deal with along the way. So there's been opportunities to do things slightly differently, opportunities to refocus on things that were potentially a better solution to deliver up front, and also it revealed opportunities where we needed to look at the foundations and reset those foundations such that the AI was properly successful. And just one of the examples on where we've been flexible and brought things forward because it would bring benefits financial assessments for adult social care, which was found to be more deliverable more quickly and allowed council to get the benefits from that. Oh, sorry. So as far as the social care reviews themselves, this has been reviewed following the pilot phase of doing around 200 reviews, something like that, and that gave us the opportunity to look and say, okay, we need to home in on these particular areas, these being supported living, which is where social workers actually living in with people, and there's opportunities there to use the tech to actually both reduce the requirement for actually people to be there and use tech. So use that tech such that those people were in a much better place to live more independent and less supervised lives. Proportionate handling, which is around the process identified that was of care, which involved actually two people or more in having to go out to each call, and the technology exists now such that can be achieved much more cost effectively with one and technology rather than multiple people, and direct payments in the process. There are a large number of such that commission their own care or aren't using those payments, or don't need those payments anymore. So reassessing that and recovering where that's not required has been an important outcome. And so that key to doing that has been actually resetting the relationship and the understanding and the culture within the council, our partners and our providers, and that training is happening during February across those cohorts, and they will then straight into resetting and redoing those assessments based on that new immediate action. So we will be expecting that process of going through some 1,100 reviews. It's down to the 8 and 9. Now we would expect to be completed in the early part of the new financial year, April. And as was on the timeline earlier, we're working with the AI partner, internal colleagues, to identify what this needs to be for the phase 2 of the AI programme in 2025-26. And that's currently looking like this shape. So customer service and wider council, deeper automations. So being able to do much more of the actual, once the conversation's been had with service users, being able to much more of the actual service in the back office, looking at in the revenues benefits space, in adult social care, looking at a co-pilot that will do we're calling it smart notes, but it's like an assistive technology that allows significantly reduce the workload involved in having conversations and interviews. So it allows a much richer conversation to be had rather than scribbling notes all the time, but will accurately collect that data and massively reduce the actual overhead and admin required to actually collect those notes and understand them, distribute copies of and actually put that data into systems. Managing adult social care skills within children's managing permanent payments for caregivers, management, further debt chasing of even debt in the special education needs, using that co-pilot smart notes approach to actually have send evaluations, conversations, and interviews, scrutinies within SEND, and in Derby Homes, expanding the co-pilot, the upgraded versions of Darcy into the Halley space, and similarly within the internally facing co-pilot, whatever we decided within the staff, what to call that. Not any recommendations. That is essentially where we are.
Brilliant.
Thank you
very much for the update. Yeah, I can remember when you first came to committee, I think about a year ago, when we gave the initial update, and just initially looking at things like the Darcy and Ali numbers and the use, the phone calls, the messages, those numbers seem to have gone up significantly, but the 44% deflection seems like a really, really positive step that pulling them out has led to, so that's good. I'm happy to open up initially to councillors. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Eddie, for the presentation. First question is, just prior to the launch in April 2023, do you have any analysis on sort of those residents that districtly excluded within the city, the percentage, what you think?
We have ongoing work looking at digital exclusion for programs of work to do things like quality, for example, so we know, they use the council that are no longer suitable for council use because of the big security overhead on using our applications, and gifting those devices and connectivity, so airtime and training for want to go online but are excluded by reasons of either skills, equipment or connectivity. So that's proven an extremely successful program. But there's an overarching assisted digital and digital inclusion piece where we accept, and we will always need to accept, that some people not only can't but won't go online. So part of that digital inclusion piece is to ensure that no one will ever be excluded because they can't or won't go online for whatever reason. So there are always the channels that people can access all the services through a front door, like downstairs. There will always be a call centre that there is a human in the loop, such that if the automation or the AI can't assist people, or they insist on not using it, there will always be a human available within the parameters of opening hours, of course, on services, and within the emergency procedures for critical life and limb services. Those channels, disability and accessibility channels, will always be available. We can't assume, we will never assume everybody will one day be digital, because that won't. So there will always be those interlinked channels available as we do. We do and maintain a view on, through things like the Good Things Foundation, on what the state of digital inclusion is nationally. Obviously, that's a steady progression. The council ensure where it's possible.
Thank you. Just in terms of testing, because I know you mentioned it quite a lot in the slides, how What meaningful participation have you involved residents in testing these solutions? If that are resident facing?
Yeah, we've been quite extensive. I can't remember all of the names of the groups, but there was some here last week with my project manager from the schools doing some work with us. There's been various different people over the last few weeks that have been into the council that have spent some quite considerable time with the IT team testing it out. And I can give you the groups off the top of my head, but we have made sure we are reaching out to people to make sure that we're making sure we're testing it with the right.
So you sort of reach out to those traditionally marginalised and disadvantaged groups.
Yes.
So the qualities and diversity form have been really engaged in ensuring the representatives from all parts forward to actually participate in the testing and actual feedback and inform the final product. It's just mentioned that's been very positive.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Epsom.
Yeah, as we're all aware, when first introduced the word teething problems and sort of fairly negative publicity about not responding and not responding correctly, do you feel after the period of time we're now over all of those, we're still working through a number? Glitches, difficulties, about public perceptions themselves.
It is indeed. There were certainly some initial difficulties with unexpected responses, and those were situations where some of those things will never come out until you actually go live and the systems being used in anger. And I think pretty much all of those fitted into that category. But what we ensured we had in place at the time is there was and continues to be a regime where we actually we capture that feedback. We look at the performance on a daily basis of see where it could do better as far as responses, or if it was modified slightly, it could actually have fulfilled an automation.
Do you feel as though you're on top of it? So that's what I'm asking basically. Were glitches, were problems. Are some of those still continuing, but are you confident you're completely on top of it, or almost?
I can't say it's absolutely foolproof.
Okay.
because
what more needs to be done?
Because it's not. We need to continue with an ongoing regime that it continues to improve. What I would say is it's dealt with 1.7 million questions now.
Yeah,
we've had 65 complaints. For the whole line, which is 0.003% of the questions. All of those are taken seriously and fed into the problem. But we've got to a stage now, which I think precisely to where you're going, is that we've got to a stage now where it's not. Well, it's categorised as, or people will report it on the basis of it being an issue with the AI. It's actually now, in general terms, the residual issues are where frustrated with having to wait for a human call. It'd be 6% of cases where the AI doesn't deal with it, passes it to a human colleague, and just like before AI system, those people need to wait in a queue, and obviously they get frustrated and sometimes think, oh, it's the AI making.
What sort of waiting times are there the frustrated having to wait? Are they reasonable in the circumstances?
It's I suppose reasonable subjective. It's typically around 8 minutes.
8 minutes, okay.
On average, it was a similar situation before.
Yeah.
Some services which are longer than that, which again we're using that information to say, is there anything we can do about that?
Okay. 8 minutes doesn't sound bad to me. EDF, I've been stuck on my phone to them for 30, 40, 45 minutes. So, big major companies. So compared to that, that's reassuring. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Councillor Pandy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my question is, when we talk of AI, how much money are we spending on this particular thing? A year, or what is the budget allocated for this particular thing? And before AI started, how many receptionists we had, or people who were doing this kind of job? And since we started this thing and nearly more than like 18 months into a particular thing, how much saving actually we have actually made in terms of human resources or whatever? Because I'm sure like we'll be paying a package or this won't be coming for free anyway. So we are making investment into this particular thing as well. So I really want to know the idea of the finances, how it has helped the council.
Okay, so the overall program over 4 years, I think, is around the 2.3 million. I think we're 2.3 million pound. Members will recall on the original business case that there was a set of targeted options that would potentially give us around 12.25 million pounds once fully delivered per year in savings, and that's not that's not from specifically from headcount reductions. So, for example, the larger part of the potential savings comes from things like the AI giving us the ability to more readily do social care assessments and assessments in a different way. So it reduces the actual cost to the council of contracted social care contracts. There's elements of it which through the income management, so being able to collect much more of the debt that's owed to the council from the wide range of sources, but there is also a sizable savings from so at the smaller end, and what was identified early on in this, those levels of savings would be deliverable from the vacancy reduction, because it financial assessments, it matched the attrition rate of the council.
I'm sorry, but it all sounds like you say that it's not, the savings will not be made on headcount. So obviously we are saying it won't be made on headcounts, and then you are saying that there are intangible savings which will be made by using this AI to provide social care. But you got the portal anyway. So if people were using the websites and all, they were feeding the information on that portal anyway. Why would we need to invest so heavily on AI? This is what I'm confused. You are projecting some figures, but there is no, I'm not hearing any solid projection, the figures or specification that can indicate that yes, the savings would be there. It all sounds like projection and maybe feel good kind of conclusion. Okay, we'll do that. I'm not hearing anything specific. This is where the savings would be made.
Okay.
Can I jump in on Councillor Pandy's point? Because I did have a question around savings. So the first year, so going back end of February, the council announced the AI phase 1 to 3 programme. He said by the end of this financial year we'll have saved just under 4 million.
That's right, 3.9 million.
Yeah. Are we hitting that target?
Yes.
We are hitting that target.
Yes. And this is, as I was just about to come back to the councillor's question, these are intangible savings that might have been seen historically in other projects. This programme is specifically focused. There's very close identification on where the savings have been targeted. There is a senior finance officer who's working on an ongoing basis throughout the programme ensuring that the projected savings are identified and cashed to the council, and that is being reported through the financial process. So our councillors' attention to the quarter three financial reports that were presented to members. That does give details on where the savings targeted, what the achievement has been had, and how that has been delivered. Because as I mentioned earlier, we've had to be flexible.
Why was the report not? Why were those figures not part of the report?
Well, partly because apologies, but the phase one 3.9 million has already been reported in the quarter three, and as far as the actual targeted savings for the next period, the timing of this meeting was such that those are still being approved through the budget process. So we weren't able to bring those in this meeting.
Those figures are in the quarter three report that we'd have access to as councillors.
Yes,
yeah.
Chair, if I may, the quarter three financial monitoring is due to be published with the cabinet agenda on Tuesday of next week.
Yeah. Councillor Ross?
Yeah. Well, I have to admit, I usually have Luddite tendencies, but I think I can get my head around the figures. Was it £2.3 million initial setup costs? Good.
It was partly the setup costs.
Yeah, that's fine. You're aiming for 12.25 million savings, which is excellent. So 6-to-1 ratio for investment sounds pretty good to me. And you're already at 4.9, which is more than double what the initial investment was. So as a part of the Luddite tendency, I'm quite happy as long as that continues in that way. Obviously. So I'd like to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where we don't employ anybody, because people need jobs. We don't just need to have machines. So that's where my Luddite tendencies come from. So that's for another day and another argument. But in terms of the investment, I don't think that can be doubted. Thank you, Chair.
No, I agree. I think that's why I was curious about that first year saving of 3.9 million and whether we've hit that. And obviously from tonight's report, happy that, which is great in terms of the longer term.
And in the interest of being absolutely transparent, that's varied somewhat. So some of the approaches within the programme have kind of been pushed back, and some things brought slightly forward, but the whole will still be delivered. And that's why in the quarterly report it will talk about some things being delivered, some things being mitigated, because we've adjusted the timeline of savings. All the savings are still there on the overall timeline.
Okay. And we're getting into the phase now of rolling out phase two.
Yeah.
Right. I'm right in saying that. In terms of the whole programme phases one to 3, we're in a good position? Is it, give or take, it's still on track? Is it a 3-year programme, or was it a 5-year programme to get phases 1 to 3 rolled out?
We need to have that flexibility, of course, because from the outset there's something pioneering here. So it's around a 2-year delivery process. We're still fine-tuning the actual next programme. So the next stage of the programme, 2025, 26. So we'll be drilling down on what the delivery periods are, precisely what the areas that will be transformed are, and exactly where the savings will come from. We're still very much targeting what was initially forecasted, but it may well be slightly different. I think, and from phase one may has been slightly different.
Sure. Again, I would talk like a layman, a resident. So you're saying savings are made and savings would be made, and you are saying that savings are not coming from the headcount, right? So who is?
Sorry, I didn't say savings aren't coming from that.
Not majorly. Let me talk about Martin. Martin, it's okay. So the person who's assessing and calculating all these savings, right, or the software, how is it being calculated? On where are we actually making the savings? When you're saying this AI portal or the bots are making savings, how exactly are they making savings?
So the savings touched on that earlier, is there's a number of areas of things. This it isn't just about automating what people do and then deleting those. There is some of that, but the council, as we previously reported, have been able to actually do that by automating and then deleting vacant roles and readjusting where colleagues work, rather than actually deleting roles where people are imposed. But larger savings are coming out of AI giving us the ability to actually more readily analyse things like the adult social care packages and review those packages, and we've found and are finding in that space that there are very large savings to be made by actually looking at those care packages more regularly, reviewing them, right sizing them, applying new opportunities that providers of AI and technology enabled care can actually bring to the opportunity, and actually reducing the cost of providing care to adult social care users using this method. And that's where the largest opportunity is. And then the third main element is that ability to use the AI to actually collect debt that was previously uncollectible and had to be written off by the council because it couldn't actually collect that. And again, those processes that we've started off in the design by doing it in a manual way and using that approach to actually program the AI, so the AI takes over, such that we can continue to doing this, not so we don't just do it once and then it starts to ebb away. It continues to be hard baked into the way we do. We've already delivered very large sums of debt that was previously unrecoverable, which has been cash, and that is actively being monitored by a head of finance to ensure that those are real savings, those go into the MTFP, such that the council can make its savings and protect services and doesn't have to make cuts elsewhere. And that is happening on an ongoing basis and is being reported through the council financial processes, such as Alex touched on, the quarter three financials, and into the MTFP that will be going through council processes in the coming weeks.
Just to my understanding, I'll just deduce it. What you're saying that in future we will see higher debt collection from the council because we are spending heavily, we are spending on AI. So this is what we are saying. We will see a significant increase in debt collection from the council. Right. Thank you.
And a reduction in the money spent on social care, on bad debt, and more automation such that we don't need to fill vacancies. I think in the interest of transparency, that's where the focus is on the current program. It would be naive to believe that as the possession of AI continues worldwide, where savings and benefits and efficiencies might be as the program continues beyond the existing program. It's moving such a dramatic and rapid pace. We don't know that yet, and we will have to adapt to that when we get there too. I can't say AI will never replace certain roles. People within their roles going forward will be AI enabled and will need to be resourced within the council, and the council designed differently in accordance with that new reality.
Can I just make a final question around the debt chasing aspect, the debt management, because we had a presentation, I think it was last committee, around the council's sort of overhaul of its debt management and the large piece of work that's going on there. One takeaway that I kind of had from it as well is this massive piece of work going on to ensure the council is getting a lot better at chasing its debt, more efficient, that there are people on the other end of that who could suddenly find themselves being inundated with contact letters, things from the council asking about this debt. So I guess the one concern I have is when I look at the slide that's up there and it says debt chasing expansion, and if it's being done through automation, are we going to have a system now where letters are just being churned out chasing the debt? Or, you know, we obviously might uncover more debt, particularly say from residents and businesses that they didn't know they had. Are we suddenly going to see an increase in letters dropping through people's doors saying, where they previously thought they owed X, but actually now they owe an increased amount of Y? And yeah, I guess the main point though is I have a thought in my head that through AI and the system in place, are we just going to be churning letters out, constantly chasing people, or are we putting some systems in, checks in place? Because at the end of the day, there's someone on the receiving end of that, and that can potentially have a detrimental impact on them.
The very quick answer is yes, we are doing that. A key tenet of this this approach is by having that single view on debt, we can also have a view on what the implications of the debt collection are. So we can apply ethical constraints to debt. So where the intelligence gives the ability to understand who can pay and who just won't pay. It gives us that view of what the sum total of debt is for an individual or an organisation, such that they're not receiving 20 different communications from different departments all at once and just overwhelming them. So all those different approaches that allows us to do it in a controlled way and an ethical way, rather than more traditional, unfortunate ways of actually counting debt. That's all being brought to bear on this road. And we know from research in the field that using some of the methods we're going to sending a letter or a colleague phoning up is a kind of a catch-all final option. We will look to send texts, to do automated phone calls. But research shows us that reminder and that easy opportunity to say, would you like to pay now or pay a payment now? That is proven to actually deliver much more increased revenue for people who can pay.
Thank you very much. Good. No more questions. So yeah, thanks for your time tonight, Andy and the team. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Look forward to updating you at the point in future.
Sure, yeah. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, item 6, is an update on our constitutional review for the City Council. The draft constitution was uploaded onto the agenda. It was 365 on we go, we've all read it. But if we haven't, Alex Hoff has kindly put some summary slides together for us. So Alex, feel free.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely here today to discuss the constitutional review, which is the major governance project for the council, first commissioned in July of 2022. Before again, just briefly introduce two colleagues who will no doubt be familiar to councillors who work in democratic services. We've got Craig Stanley with us this evening, who's our democratic services manager, relatively newly appointed to the council, and Sarah Ames, our appeals business manager. Both of whom are the service managers who probably have the most to do with the constitution on a day-to-day basis in terms of how we work with the council. So here to support me and answer any questions that you might have as we move through this presentation. I think it's important to say that I'm going to endeavour to be as candid as possible with you as a board about what has been quite a challenging project. I think it's safe to say. Both personally and I know colleagues as well, there's been some considerable frustration about a project that's seemingly stalled, I think. And and a sense that perhaps it has reached a bit of a political impasse. So hopefully our discussion today can try and inject a bit of life into the project and bring it back towards a position where we could bring this to a satisfactory conclusion. It's really important to emphasise that over the last getting on for 3 years, there's been a quite significant amount of time and resource put into this review by the council. That's in the form of input from not just democratic services, but other services within the council who manage and maintain different elements of the council's constitution. Also, the time of those members who've been actively involved in the review process, simply through the council working group, and also fundamentally the financial resources that have been put into this review, in that we have spent money on consultative fees in working with the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. So from my perspective, it's really important that we find a way forward if the benefits of the project and that investment are to be fully realised. So in terms of what I'm going to try and cover this evening, I'm going to briefly go through the timeline of the project to date, including the outcome of the consultation that initially took place with our partners in the autumn of 2022. Seek to summarise some of the key changes that would be brought about by the adoption of the new constitution, and why it's important that the project is brought to a conclusion. And I think it's important for us as councillors, as officers, that we know the status of the project from the perspective of you as members. Ultimately, as you know, it was brought before full council in May of 2024, and there wasn't any significant steer or debate provided at that point in time when the constitution was rejected by full council. So really looking for an input from the board as to where you as members think we need to go next with the project. So first of all, I think it's important for me to set out what the constitution is, and perhaps most importantly what it isn't. I think it's quite traditionally seen as a set of rules for ourselves as officers and you as councillors to follow. And whilst that is true to a certain extent, it is much more than that. It's a tool for the effective governance of the council. It's about creating accountability and transparency in the way that we do our business, about setting out our core values and principles about what we want to be as a council, and also about giving both yourselves as councillors and officers with delegated authority confidence to act. So it clearly sets out roles and accountability. However, that all being said, it's also important for me to emphasise that a good constitution alone doesn't guarantee strong governance for the council. Just as much it's about culture, about behaviour and practice from all of those who are charged with the good governance of the authority. So that includes people like ourselves, but also councillors as well. The constitution isn't carved into tablets of stone. Our current constitution was adopted in the early 2000s and broadly reflects the model constitution that was adopted by a lot of councils around that time when the current executive arrangements came into law. And whilst it's been updated piecemeal over that time, we strongly felt that it was overdue. But a constitution needs to be continually updated and amended to reflect changes in the law, changes in local circumstances, and it requires upkeep and care from all of those who have that task of maintaining the good governance of the council. My reflection on a lot of conversations I've perhaps had in these kind of spaces throughout the project is the focus of members is naturally relatively narrow compared to maybe how we view the constitution as officers. So your attention will naturally be focused on things like the council procedure rules, the overview and scrutiny procedure rules, whereas for those officers who work with it on a day-to-day basis, it's about the scheme of delegations, about how power is exercised within the council, where decisions are made, that kind of thing. So I'd encourage everyone to look at the constitution in its broadest sense as a governance tool for the whole council that affects how decisions are made and that embeds our governance culture throughout the organisation. Move on to the timeline for the project. I don't need to remind councillors too much about this because you'll have been involved at different stages in different capacities. But this review has spanned successive council administrations. So it was first initiated in July 2022 by the then Cabinet Member for Governance and then subsequently endorsed by the full council in the same month. There was an agreement by the full council in that month at that meeting to seek external support for this review. We felt it was a project that required external input purely because of its scope and its size, but also to hold a mirror up to the council, because sometimes when we work internally, when we look at things ourselves, we're not able to necessarily see the things that are good or bad about our existing arrangements. We quite quickly identified the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny as the organisation who we wanted to work with on this project. For those who are familiar with them, they are sector leading expertise in local authority governance matters. And in fact, they are also the organisation that has been brought in by the government on several occasions to look at governance failures in several councils around the country. And I'll touch on that a little bit more later on. In autumn of 2022, we held a series of workshops with political groups and key officers, and the CFGS produced their findings in April 2023. Since then, we've been working with a cross-party working group with representation from councillors from all groups on the council to develop a draft constitution that not only reflected the findings of the report, but was also specific to Derby's particular circumstances. So the CFGS provided us with a model constitution, and then through the work of that working group, we've modified it and changed it to reflect certain things that councillors and officers wanted to see reflected that were specific perhaps to Derby. My reflection on those discussions is that they were always really productive, had some really positive engagement with councillors and officers over the course of this project, where we shared open and honest feedback about what worked well and what didn't work so well. However, I think where we have encountered challenges is when we then brought that constitution forward for adoption. We've now done that on 2 occasions. The first was in January 2024. It was placed on the council agenda, but pulled shortly before the meeting after some last-minute concerns were raised about the council questions process in particular. Further changes were requested after that meeting and incorporated in the draft constitution, pending consideration at the annual general meeting in May of last year. But as councillors will be aware, at that meeting, the document was voted down and there was relatively little debate. And I think, if I'm being honest, as officers, we were left with relatively little steer as to what needed to change or what needed to happen to ensure the document could be ultimately adopted. So that brings us around now. So the project really has been on hold since May through to about last autumn. Clearly, there was the general election and other commitments on time of officers. But since autumn 2024, we've been trying to re-engage with group leaders to identify a path through this impasse. And in December, just shortly before Christmas, had a positive meeting with group leaders where there were some suggestions made about how we might bring this forward to conclusion. And I'll cover those as I move through the rest of the slides. So to backtrack slightly, just in terms of the findings of the CFGS, I think there's a recognition from everyone involved in this project that the elements of the constitution were outdated and needed refreshing. As I said, it's existed in its current format since the early 2000s. And I think the common theme that was identified across those workshops held with the CFGS was that there was a desire for change from members across the board. The CFGS made 17 individual recommendations, which I won't go through line by line, but key findings included the fact that certain meetings had lost their purpose as decision-making bodies and had taken on processes that we might normally associate with maybe scrutiny meetings or other forums that we already have within the council. There was a sense from members that public engagement, particularly at full council meetings, was fairly unsatisfactory, both for councillors and the members of the public who come to those meetings. There was a sense that the constitution in its current format was pretty unwieldy and difficult to interpret for officers. So for those who are familiar with it, it's broken up into 6 different sections, 6 different PDFs, difficult to cross-reference and jump between different areas of it and read across. Also, our scheme of delegations, the way it was structured, and I'll touch on shortly, had become quite out of date and didn't provide officers with the confidence they needed to act with assurance when discharging their delegated authorities. The CFGS found that our system of neighbourhoods, boards and forums was pretty bloated and unnecessary, in that under our current constitution they are established as committees of the council, and with that comes a lot of administration that our neighbourhood officers have to undertake in order to make those meetings happen. it doesn't have to be done that way. They don't have to be constituted meetings of the council. We can still have neighbourhood boards, neighbourhood forums as consultative bodies for engaging with residents and communities. But the CFGS's recommendation that was that they weren't established as committees of the council, and therefore freed up capacity for our neighbourhoods teams to not have to worry about, for example, the period of notice you give for agendas, or the timelines within which minutes have to be produced, and really focus on that engagement with members of the public. And there's also a sense that scrutiny could be enhanced and perhaps conducted at an earlier stage certainly in the executive decision-making process. So making sure that scrutiny boards are provided with the appropriate information to fulfil their roles effectively, and a sense that the current way exec scrutiny works in particular, i.e. meeting 1 or 2 days before cabinet, didn't necessarily lead to tangible improvements to services, because it was difficult for decision makers to actually have time to take those recommendations into account. So on the basis of some of those findings, the CFGS produced a model constitution, and that model constitution was based on one that they had worked on for several newly created unitary authorities and several new councils that have come into existence across England over the last 4 or 5 years. It was a model constitution produced, and then through the council working group throughout the summer and autumn of last year, there was a process whereby which we've updated, refined, added to that constitution to make it something that was more specific to. So if I go through some of the key changes that the document makes and things that members will perhaps notice from our existing arrangements. Firstly, rather basically, it's around its format, accessibility and language. As I mentioned, it's a document that's routinely used by officers, and it needs to be written in a language and format that can be easily understood and interpreted. I sometimes find that our existing constitution is written in a form of legalese that isn't very accessible. And for those of us who work with it every day, maybe we can learn to understand it. But for those colleagues who maybe only need to refer to it every now and again, it can be quite difficult. And invariably that means that they come to democratic services, they're asking for support, and you know that takes up the capacity of the team. Equally, it needs to be accessible for councillors when you have cause to reference it, and also members of the public, because it documents their rights to interact with the council and how they can engage with certain democratic processes that sit within the constitution. For those who've had a look at the draft version, the new version is a single document with key elements of it grouped thematically. There are far more hyperlinks and footnotes contained within it that cross-reference to relevant protocols, policies, decisions that the council has made. Current working draft is attached at Appendix 1, and councillors will notice that if you use the bookmark tool on the right-hand side in Adobe, you can quickly jump between different sections of the document. That's not something that's possible within our existing version. And hopefully you'd agree that it's significantly easier to navigate. And the fact it's not split across multiple documents makes everyone's life that little bit easier. So in terms of the next set of changes, focusing on full council, I think the workshops identified a fairly widespread appetite to change the way that public engagement takes place at full council. The council questions process is something that's been gone back and forth a little bit, because there was a desire for change from the workshops and then some concerns raised about what the changes were that were proposed. Just to reassure councillors, what is written into the current working draft is broadly similar to what we have currently, i.e. members of the public are entitled to ask a maximum of 2 questions followed by a supplementary question. However, it does give more scope for questions to be ruled out of order that perhaps relate to the same subject, that or are not about matters for which the council has a direct responsibility for. That was something that councillors agreed on across the board, was actually at the stage that this work took place. And granted, it's tailed off a little bit now, but when these workshops took place, we were routinely receiving 20-25 public questions per council meeting, and that was taking up a significant period of time. So I think there was a desire to see that tightened up. But in its place, there were some new arrangements for public engagement. So, for example, it introduces a concept known as deputations. So if a group of electors write to the council, I think it's 5 electors written into the constitution about a particular issue, they will be provided with an opportunity to come and address the full council meeting. So they will be given 5 minutes to speak, a representative of that deputation will be given 5 minutes to speak, and then 5 minutes to respond to questions from councillors. And it's a forum in which residents can raise issues at that highest level, with some controls placed around it so it doesn't obviously take up too much of the meeting's time. Equally, there were some revised proposals around how what would currently be described as cabinet member statements work, whereby in the current format, a cabinet member might deliver a statement and then an opposition spokesperson responds and that's it. In these current arrangements, there would actually be an opportunity for councillors to ask questions of the cabinet member, again time limited, to just provide a bit more structure to the meeting. Another area that has seen some change, or certainly providing more clarity, is around setting out in unambiguous terms what are the functions and responsibilities of the council's executive, and what are those functions and responsibilities that are non-executive, i.e. reserved to full council and the council's committees. Over time, I'm sure councillors will gain an understanding of that, but it's not clearly written into our existing constitution. If you know where to look, you can find the relevant regulations which detail all of those things, but it's important for everyone that everyone knows where certain powers rest. And so in this new document, it quite clearly sets out those things that are only to be the responsibility of the council, i.e. non-executive, and those things that are by default, therefore, the responsibility of the executive. Similarly, in this document, it captures customs and practices that have existed in Derby for a long time around the budget full council meeting, but that have been never written into our constitution. So, for example, the convention that the mover of the budget has an unlimited period to speak, and then one spokesman from each political group then has an unlimited period to respond before amendments are then taken in order of group size. That's something that we've adhered to in Derby for a long time, but it's not explicitly written into our constitution. It's just a convention that we've adopted. And if we're going to keep doing those things, and it's important to councillors, then we need to write those things into our constitution. Moving forward to committees, won't spend too long on this one, but I'd like to think that the constitution quite clearly documents our committee structure, and it also provides a separate set of procedure rules for committees as opposed to full council. In our current procedure rules, there's the council procedure rules and then a series of supplementary rules that can be applied to committees. There's a recognition that committees work completely differently to a full council meeting, and therefore they require a separate set of procedures that allow for, I suppose, a more informal discussion as opposed to the structured nature of a full council meeting. Again, as I mentioned before, recognition that neighbourhood boards and forums and ward committees don't need to be established as committees of the council, freeing up the capacity of our neighbourhood officers from those meeting administration tasks that they might have to do at this point in time. In terms of the executive, and by the executive, of course, I mean the cabinet, the most obvious change is a change to our key decision threshold. In our current constitution, the financial threshold for a key decision is a decision with an impact of £250,000. Now, as far as I could establish, that threshold had not changed since the executive regulations were first established in the early 2000s. Now, in terms of what constitutes a significant decision, £250,000 in 2001 and 2002 is a very different story to £250,000 in 2025. And so it's recommended that the key decision threshold is increased, which will mean that slightly fewer decisions are made by the council cabinet, but more decisions are made by cabinet members under delegated authority, with appropriate checks and balances in place to ensure that those decisions are reported and scrutinised appropriately. And my sense is that would bring us in line with many of our comparator authorities, councils of similar size and composition who have similar levels of key decision threshold. Not proposing to change the second definition of key decision, which is a decision that has a significant social, environmental or economic impact on residents living or working in two or more wards. Those changes reflect the view of the CFGS that far too many decisions are being fed through the cabinet process, and greater delegation to executive members and officers could be utilised, as I said, with appropriate safeguards and reporting in place to ensure those decisions are clearly documented and available for non-cabinet councillors to scrutinise. Moving on to joint arrangements, again, this isn't something that's clearly reflected in our current constitution, but in the new document, it lists all of the joint arrangements that are entered into by the council And they can be any number of things. So they might be our relationship with Derby Homes as an arm's length body of the council, but also maybe our relationship with the newly created combined authority as a separate local authority, a separate authority that we appoint members to. As you'll see in the joint arrangement section of the Constitution, we list, for example, how councillor appointments are made to those bodies, normally through the process that's followed at the AGM each year. In terms of scrutiny, as I said, there's a recognition that overview and scrutiny could be improved and have more impact, but I think it's safe to say there wasn't a consensus on what that might look like. And various different proposals were discussed with the working group through the process of developing the Constitution. And when the first attempt was made to secure approval by full council, there was a proposal to reduce the number of scrutiny points. Now, it quickly became apparent that that wasn't necessarily supported more broadly. And when the document was brought back to May full council, that change was reversed. I would say that it's important that whatever arrangements we adopt, we need to ensure that scrutiny of capacity is used to its greatest effect. And when I say scrutiny capacity, that means the capacity of yourselves as councillors to look at issues and examine them, but also our capacity as a democratic services team to provide the right support to the scrutiny process. In my opinion, our current scrutiny structure is overly large. And I'll touch on it in a little while. When we look at councils that have had formal intervention, Thurrock is a good example. They had very similar scrutiny structures to ourselves. And if the CFGS were here today, what I'm sure they would say is that their recommended structure for scrutiny is you have a formal scrutiny committee, something like the Executive Scrutiny Committee, that coordinates scrutiny activity and manages the work that scrutiny look at over the course of the year. And then they commission a series of slightly more informal task and finish groups where a group of interested councillors will go away, investigate an issue, gather evidence, work with democratic services to produce a report and make recommendations back to exec scrutiny and then through to the relevant decision-making body. There's a balance to be struck between that, because I think there is absolutely a place for this type of scrutiny, formal committees where we in public meet and discuss issues, but equally some really valuable scrutiny work can be had when you get a group of interested individuals, whether councillor or officer, together in a room, really get under the skin of an issue and do a really thorough review. And that can include bringing in service users, bringing in experts from other councils, that kind of thing. So our scrutiny arrangements need to reflect that balance, I suppose. I think in the report that was brought to full council last May, there was a recommendation that we continue to look at the scrutiny structure, that whilst we maintain the current arrangements for the time being, we continue to look at it and we adopt something that, as I say, makes the best use of our capacity as a group of councillors and officers to undertake thorough scrutiny activity. Within our scrutiny arrangements, there is the incorporation of something called a councillor call to action. This would allow any councillor to have an item included on the agenda at a relevant scrutiny board that affects their ward specifically when other avenues for redress have been exhausted. So if you've got a really thorny issue in your ward and you feel like you have struggled to gain a satisfactory resolution from the council, you can require that an item is brought to the relevant scrutiny committee and a discussion held. Supported by the CFGS, we have also included within the document, this was a change made since the first draft was received and at the request of the working group, we've included in what we are calling a new scrutiny protocol. And that's not the scrutiny procedure will set out the rules and regulations around scrutiny. The scrutiny protocol is more about establishing the right culture for effective scrutiny and challenge to take place, that we hope can lead to better outcomes for service users. The entire purpose of the scrutiny structure is that it achieves tangible changes to the way the council delivers its services. And that requires scrutiny to be conducted in a way that's non-political, that has a productive working relationship between scrutiny and the executive, who are the ones who hold decision-making power. And sometimes our relationships in Derby, I don't necessarily think meet those criteria. So I think there's work that we can do there to improve that relationship between scrutiny and the executive and make sure that scrutiny leads to more meaningful improvements to the way that we deliver our services in Derby. Moving on to the councillors section of the constitution, fairly straightforward. It sets out the roles and responsibilities of councillors, but it quite clearly documents what are the responsibilities of all councillors, what might be the responsibility of the leader of the council, what might be the responsibility of a cabinet member. It goes through committee chairs, and it even goes down to roles like member champions. So as you know, we appoint member champions each year at the AGM, but a common complaint, I suppose, from councillors who occupy those roles is there's no structure to those roles. There's no job description that exists for them, and so sometimes they're left feeling a little bit unsupported about what their role is. We've tried to codify that a little bit within the constitution and provide a structure. Also within that part of the document, it's effectively a library of relevant codes and protocols that relate to your roles as councillors. So that includes things like the code of conduct, the complaints procedure, how you can access support through democratic services, the member planning protocol, the councillors' allowances scheme, things like that. Moving over to the officer side, largely reflects the councillor side. Similarly, it sets out the roles and responsibilities of officers, but perhaps the most extensive change in this section is for the officer scheme of delegations, and this is a really important recommendation of the CFGS. The view of the CFGS, and I'll agree with them, is that our current scheme of delegations is quite restrictive by virtue of the fact that it seeks to be exhaustive, and our scheme of delegations seeks to detail every power that is reserved to council, every power that is reserved to the cabinet, every power that is delegated down to the chief executive and to service directors. And the problem with that model for a scheme of delegations is that the roles and the powers and functions of the council change all the time. There's always new legislation, and that document very quickly becomes out of date. So what the CFGS have recommended to us, and what is widely recognised as good practice within the sector now, I suppose, is to have a more permissive scheme of delegations that basically says all powers and functions are delegated to the officers who are closest to the point of service delivery, with the exception of the following thing. And therefore, certainly these are the things that we as councillors or committees or the cabinet withdraw from delegation to officers and want to have responsibility for ourselves. And that way, it means that by default, powers are reserved to officers closest to the point of service delivery, with the exception of those things that members have identified as being matters that should be their responsibility. Of course, there are certain things that in law can only be the responsibility of, for example, the full council. And of course, those things would still be reserved to council. It doesn't change anything like that, but it does seek to create far more permissive model for decisions to be made within the organisation. And of course, any officer who is making a decision, an executive decision that would otherwise be the responsibility of a councillor, has a duty to report that decision, and we as democratic services have a duty to publish those decisions. So accompanying this work on the officer scheme of delegations, we as a team are looking to improve the way that we report those officer delegated decisions that are made throughout the council. Also in this section is a comprehensive list of proper officer functions, and also those codes and protocols that affect our conduct as officers. Also contained here are the financial and contract procedure rules, with thresholds aligned to other areas of the constitution. So they are things that you'll see coming through the cabinet process sometimes, but about how the extent of delegation in terms of certain types of financial transaction. So for example, the approval of grant funding, or powers to enter into contracts and that kind of thing. I won't go into that in too much detail because I am not the subject expert on those areas. They are procedures that are predominantly managed by our finance and procurement teams. I suppose what I'd like to emphasise this evening is the Constitution in its current form does continue to present governance risks to the Council, as highlighted by the work undertaken by the CFGS. So we know that our scheme of delegations is not up to date. We know that it doesn't give officers authority to act with the confidence they need to go out and discharge their responsibilities. As I've said, in its current format, that scheme can never be completely accurate or up to date. And if we adopted the more permissive model, it makes that task of monitoring and maintaining the Constitution that little bit more straightforward. And I think, broadly speaking, the CFGS pointed out that our current Constitution includes too many layers and hurdles that prevent fast and efficient decision making for the Council. So over time, although we ostensibly operate a leader and cabinet governance model, we have taken on features within our Constitution that are more akin to Council's operating committee system. Their view is that if we decide we want to operate a leader and cabinet model, there are some some of those things that we see, for example, that relationship between exec scrutiny and cabinet and that 2-day turnaround for recommendations, that was something that they didn't think was particularly effective or didn't lead to particularly good or strong scrutiny. And I think the other thing I would emphasise is that the ongoing delay has led to some quite practical problems in terms of the work of officers. So, for example, regulatory services have been reviewing authorisations that exist within their area, and at this point in time, we can't with any confidence say which constitution they should be looking to update. So that work is effectively having to be done twice. So they are making changes that would be incorporated within our existing constitution, but also making changes to our draft that we are hoping can be brought into effect at some point in the near future. There's an urgent need to update our contract procedure rules to reflect upcoming changes in legislation brought about by the Procurement Act. And I know Emily's joined us remotely this evening, and Teresa, the head of procurement, is part of Emily's directorate, and I know that she is working on changes to those contract procedure rules. It will be important that we bring those through in a timely way to ensure that we keep up to date with the latest legislative position. And I think, from my perspective, we as a Democratic Services team have quite a lot of projects and plans that we would like to bring forward to modernise and improve certain elements of the way that we support our committees and our decision making, particularly around the scrutiny function. But we need clarity over the direction of travel, I suppose. We've been fortunate to have some new team members join us recently, 2 of whom are in this room this evening, and I think that's an opportunity to look at our constitution with fresh eyes and bring their experiences from other councils to bear, so that we can hopefully further strengthen and improve our arrangements. We're almost there, I promise. I think it's ensuring the constitution is fit for purpose has been a really consistent theme of government interventions in some quite high profile councils that have had governance failures recently. So we can look to Nottingham, Thurrock, Slough, Birmingham on there, Tower Hamlets, and there are some links in the presentation that is available on the Democracy Portal that allows you to read those reports if you want to, which sets out a whole host of different failures that unfortunately happened at those authorities. And whilst it would be completely misleading to say that their constitutions caused those problems, stronger governance arrangements would mean that some of those failures would have maybe been caught at an earlier stage. And when you read through commissioners' reports, there is a consistent theme of streamlining schemes of delegation, ensuring scrutiny capacity is used effectively. And as I mentioned, it's the CFGS were the ones who were quite regularly commissioned by the government to go in and conduct those governance reviews at those councils. So I'm quite proud of the fact that as a council, we've proactively sought their input and reflections on our governance arrangements. We've been willing to listen to feedback, hear about those things that perhaps don't work so well. And there's an opportunity here for us to get ahead of the curve. And whilst I'd like to think that Derby would never end up in the situation that some of these councils are involved in, it could theoretically happen at some point in time. And it would be good to say that we did everything we could to make sure that those kind of things didn't happen. And part of that is having strong and effective governance arrangements enshrined in our constitution. And so I would say it's incumbent on people like myself, our statutory officers, so our monitoring officer, our Section 151 officer, our chief executive, to act, but also on yourselves as councillors to bring this forward to a position where it can be approved. The council and councillors hold a statutory responsibility to secure continuous improvements in respect to governance. And in my opinion, so far our failure to adopt a new constitution or bring this project through to conclusion has been a dereliction of that duty, if I'm being really honest with you, councillors. So I think we'd really like to see this evening, some views from yourselves about how we can get this project going again, how we can bring all councillors along with us, how we can utilise the really valuable input that's been provided by the councillors who are part of that working group, and get this project to a place where it can be brought back to full council, adopted and implemented. So I think I have heard some sort of public commentary on the constitutional review, both in the local press and raised in council meetings as well in the past. That's been a lot more helpful, I think. So heard it said that if it isn't broken, why do we need to fix it? Well, we commissioned a review. with the CFGS that clearly identified those weaknesses, and so there are areas that we need to fix. Heard it said that the Constitution needs to reflect our relationship with the new combined authority, the East Midlands Combined County Authority. And I would say that EMCA is already listed in our joint arrangements. That was captured in the changes that were made ahead of May 2024. And ironically, in the process, EMCA have obviously got their own governance arrangements, their own constitution, and in the process of developing their constitution, we have shared with them our draft, and I believe that a version of the committee procedure rules that existed and council procedure rules that were in our draft constitution are now in use at EMCA. So obviously that work, hasn't gone to waste, but I would like them to be used in Derby and not by another local authority. And I think there's been a suggestion that the constitution has perhaps been politically influenced, and I would reject that assertion completely. This draft was developed under 2 successive council administrations and entirely through the councillor working group, either in the previous administration or this current administration. I've never encountered a situation where the executive or the cabinet have tried to unduly influence how this project has moved forward. It's very much, the constitution is a document that belongs to the full council and belongs to all councillors. And I'd really strongly urge all councillors, not just those of you here this evening, to try and find a way to develop consensus and bring this forward. And I think I also heard it said at the September council meeting in relation to the winter fuel allowance that motion wouldn't have been discussed if the new constitution had been adopted. And that was categorically not true. It would have absolutely been discussed. It's a matter that affects Derby, and there is nothing within this new constitution that would have prevented that discussion taking place, because it's important that full council is a forum where those kind of issues can be raised. So I mentioned earlier that we've sought input from group leaders on what further assurance is required. We had a positive meeting before Christmas. There was an agreement that workshops would be arranged with each political group who wanted to have a workshop to talk about any remaining concerns they had with the constitution. Still awaiting a date for those from some groups, but I'm optimistic that we can get those to the diary quite soon. Other options we could potentially consider, we could ask the CFGS to come back in and do further workshops. That will obviously come to cost the council, however. We could seek to appoint either a councillor chair or an independent chair of the Constitutional Review Working Group to try and plot a way through some of those disagreements that perhaps exist. So there are options available to us, but I just urge councillors to recognise this piece of work as something that has been a really significant investment by the council, by councillors, commissioned by the full council, getting on for 3 years ago now, and we would like to bring this forward to conclusion. And in my view, we have got an excellent modern constitution sitting there ready to go, and should get about adopting it. Thank you, Chair. I think my only remaining slides are just on key contacts. So Craig and Sarah and myself have been dealing with the project internally. Also details there of the lead consultant from the CFGS, who I'm sure if any councillor wants to speak to would be more than willing. But very happy to take any questions and hopefully find a way through this complicated project.
Thank you very much, Alex. I'll open it straight up. Councillor Repton.
Yeah, it's been a long, torturous process, and I have a lot of sympathy for Alex and the staff. There's understandable in certain quarters, irrespective of who's been in charge of the council, because Alex says it's gone through different administrations, about scepticism, people thinking or suspecting, and I suspect wrongly, that it's trying to make it more favourable to whichever group pushes it through. Well, that's why it's Alex's responsibility and the staff to make sure that doesn't happen. And also, I think it's important and it's good that in recent meetings, all the leaders have met together. Progress is being made because we want it, irrespective of party politics, to make sure it works properly for the people that we represent. And I think we just need to get on with that. I personally think the best way forward are the working groups or individual groups. If there's anything that's remaining that people have concerns about, try and thrash that out. But hopefully that won't be an excuse for any of us to kick into the long grass, because we need to go into the 21st century. we don't need to leave ourselves open to what's happened to other councils. Not suggesting we would adopt this, that would, but it could do, like Thurrock or Slough or Birmingham or Nottingham or Town Hamlets. We just need to update it to make sure it's as democratic as possible. So let's hope we can get that done very soon, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there is still an education piece around it and the details that sit within it. So that next step that you referenced, Alex, about group workshops with the group leaders, to me seems like a sensible approach where we can, within our groups, if there are still concerns, you can, or somebody can come and present to us, and we can, actually have a proper session diving into the detail of what those concerns may be. So that seems like a sensible approach. Just at first glance, Councillor Atwell.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the point you made, Alex, regarding bringing in independent bodies to oversee what we're doing, I don't think that would make sense, because the bottom line is it's down to us as council and group leaders to come up with a decision and go back to our group members and look, this is where we're at, this is where we need to be. So I think by bringing them in and putting another cost on top of what we're really trying to do I think it wouldn't sit right with the general public. And from a personal perspective, it wouldn't sit right with them, because at the end of the day, the bottom line is it's down to us 51 councillors to get that done. I know you've been doing a lot of hard work yourselves and Emily and the rest of your team, yourself, to try and get this moving. And I'm hoping we have got another meeting penciled in as we've been, so we could get on board and get some direction and some direction and some leadership from the rest of our council. Look, this is what we want to do, because bottom line is, with a great deal of consensus, the buck stops with us. By appointing somebody else from an outside body, it kind of makes us look pretty weak, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I think we've got enough common sense there, regardless of what political parties bring it in or who wants to get it through. And that to me, it doesn't make sense at all. The bottom line is we're in the situation, and in order to move forward in the 21st century, buck stops with us. So I'm hoping when we do get together as group meetings, we can come to something and get something down on pen and paper, take it back to our groups, and try and get some initiative to move this forward and get it put in sooner rather than later. Thank you, Chair.
If I may just come back, I completely agree, councillors, and thank you for your kind words. As you've no doubt appreciated from the presentation and from looking at the constitution, it's quite a dry topic. It's a 400-page governance document, and as much as we've tried to make it as easy to understand as possible, ultimately you employ people like myself and Democratic Services to sort of maintain the constitution, advise you on it, and ensure that it is fit for purpose. And we wouldn't be doing our jobs properly if we allowed that to be politically influenced, or the constitution to be somehow co-opted to suit the ends of a particular political ends. So I would say that, as I said in the presentation, I have never at any point in this process felt that it was being unduly influenced. We had some really, really good discussions at the councillor working group with councillors from all backgrounds entering into those discussions in good faith. We didn't agree on everything, inevitably we wouldn't, but we worked through those issues, and by and large we were able to adopt or bring something forward that we believe reflected the views of that working group. I agree, Chair, that with hindsight, perhaps there was more that could have been done at the point that we brought it forward to all councillors to help with that education piece, and anything we can do at this stage to help councillors understand the constitution, we will absolutely endeavour to do. I would also just say, though, that there has to be a degree of trust, I suppose, that we as Democratic Services team are not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. This is a document that I firmly believe will improve the governance of this council and hopefully prevent us encountering some of those problems that other councils have encountered when it comes to their governance scrutiny arrangements, that kind of thing. I would also ask, I don't know if it's willing to consider, Chair, if that is the view of the group, that this board, that we should continue with the work and that you'd support that call for workshops between political groups. I would really welcome a recommendation from this board to potentially to group leaders or as appropriate to just emphasise the importance that those workshops take place and that we can bring this back to full council soon.
Would a bit of recommendation, Councillor? Well, I'm happy to second it.
Yeah.
So it's up to
Carry
forward
forward
some
the
workshops
user
for
trying
groups.
to best way forward, the solution to get moving forward.
Okay.
We all happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Pansy.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with the presentation, but I see this printing, and I just want to make a suggestion. If we can maybe have a white background and colored, or we print in like a handout, so we're not wasting ink, and also we are taking the environment.
It's really, I agree completely, Councillor Bailey. Wouldn't usually print in colour, so we'll speak to our
yeah, even the background, because you'll be spending using too much ink if you're using the background as a.
I would politely ask you to bring your laptop and use the device.
Oh, it's not mine. I didn't ask for it.
Okay.
I'm quite happy with the paperless, but
Chair, if Lucy was here, she would suggest it's a
I'm paper. I'm a green go.
Just one final point just before we move on to the final item. Local government reorganisation that's now coming forward. Are we potentially going to find ourselves in a situation where we're moving forward with this constitution, all this work's gone into this, but actually with the local government reorganisation, we might have to go through this whole process again with a brand new constitution for a brand new authority. So just whether you had any
potential, yes. I mean, I think that if this council, I think even with the, I'm not completely across the LGR piece, and you might need to speak to the chief executive, but even with the quickest timeline for local government reorganisation, we're probably still looking at 2028 perhaps before any new authorities come into existence. And so even if there is rationalisation or reorganisation of councils, we still need a functional and up-to-date constitution over the coming years. Any new council would obviously need to adopt its own constitutional arrangements, but if we have an excellent constitution to begin with, maybe that could be the basis for whatever Derby City Council looks like in the future.
So we've got another ready one to go. As far as I'm aware from that consultation as well, there isn't any proposals to give new authorities new powers that they don't already have. It would just be changing geography. So I don't think its current iteration would be too far off meeting the needs of whatever that new authority looks like.
Judge, am I right in saying that they're probably carrying the existing powers that have been given?
Yes, I think there's some proposals around new powers to the combined authorities that are set out in the government's white paper, but not to authorities.
Great, thank you for that, Alex. Item 7 is just a brief update, I think, from you, Alex, on a virtual meetings consultation that the council has responded to.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Council please now having prepared a presentation for this one. It's really a discussion paper, I suppose, that allows the board to consider the government's recently announced proposals around allowing local authorities in England to have hybrid or remote meeting arrangements. So the Secretary of State announced at the local government association conference in, I think, October, that the government planned to consult on this. That consultation was made available shortly afterwards, and the process was followed within the council to consult with group leaders and councillors about their thoughts on hybrid and remote meetings, as well as our input as an officer core on what that would mean for how we administer meetings. And we've responded to the consultation, which I think closed shortly before after Christmas. Sorry, so the consultation response is attached to the report for information. As you'll see as you go through, it asks several questions, but largely it's around in what circumstances should remote attendance be permitted, in all circumstances, in only emergencies, for example. General view when the consultation was undertaken within Derby was that there should be some discretion to councils to adopt arrangements that are suitable to their circumstances. So, for example, a council that covers a really wide geographical area might have much more cause for remote meetings than a council like Derby, where geographically fairly compact. So Derbyshire, for comparison, if you're a councillor who represents Glossop, you've got a long way to travel down to Matlock for meetings that sometimes don't last very long. There is also that point in around making the role of being a councillor more flexible and encouraging a broader range of people to seek elected office. So about allowing people to balance work and family life with their commitments as a councillor. Be interested to hear your experiences of that kind of thing when we discuss this paper in a moment. We in the consultation response broadly supported those arrangements, although we did reiterate that I think that we wouldn't want to see council meetings habitually being moved online. There is something important about councillors being seen to meet in public and that debate taking place in a forum where the public of Derby can come see decisions that are being made about their services. The consultation also covered we obviously covered things like procedural considerations around meetings. They've become quite difficult to administer, I think. Our experiences from the COVID pandemic, some of those Skype full council meetings that some councillors will remember were pretty hard to administer and pretty unsatisfactory in terms of how the business of meeting was conducted. We were on a very steep learning curve then, and over time we have got better at that kind of thing. And as you'll see from Jack today, we do live stream all of our meetings now. But as the law currently stands, councillors cannot be considered to be in attendance at a committee or form part of the quorum of the committee if they're attending remotely. There is a question for us as officers around resourcing of meetings, because manning the technology and administering these live streams draws capacity from our democratic services officers, when realistically their role is here to provide governance advice and ensure that the decisions that our council bodies make are the constitutional and lawful ones. They're not there as IT support, but increasingly democratic services officers across the country are now having to manage those competing things. So if it becomes commonplace that we have to host hybrid meetings via Teams whilst also dealing with members of the public in person and those kind of things, it's important for me that the appropriate resources are given to democratic services teams to manage that, and we've dealt with that in the consultation response as well. But broadly speaking, I think we all felt that it was a modernising measure that was long overdue. The law in Scotland and Wales has allowed councils to meet remotely for a long time. I see no reason why we couldn't adopt similar arrangements in England. The other area that the consultation touched upon, which wasn't expected, was around proxy voting at committee meetings. I think mixed views on proxy voting, but personally I feel it should only really be permitted in prescribed circumstances. So, for example, if a councillor was absent on long-term sickness, was on paternity leave or maternity or paternity leave or other carers leave responsibilities, I think that it could become very, very difficult to administer. And I think it also drives a bit of a coaching horses through the principle of predetermination. So very difficult to imagine how it could work in regulatory proceedings, where the onus is very much on councillors to go into a room and hear the evidence presented to them and then make a decision. How can you decide on a proxy vote before you've even heard the evidence? Yeah. So I think that there's some really difficult questions to answer. Will be interesting to see what the government proposals are on that. I think for full council meetings, maybe there's some scope, because if, for example, a councillor was on long-term sickness, in some very tightly contested councils, the absence of a single councillor can fundamentally alter the political balance of the council, and therefore setting for those decisions made at council, I can understand why there might be a cause for proxy voting, but in other settings, difficult to envisage how it would work. We've tried to reflect that in the constitution. So happy to hear your views and take any comments that you might have. As I say, very much presented as a discussion paper. There's not too much to scrutinise at this point in time, I suppose.
Councillor Atwell.
Yeah, I think apart from the caveats that Alex has rightly raised about proxy voting, I think these are sensible, relatively minor adjustments to the 21st century, and I think we'll still make sure that we fulfil our democratic responsibility. With regard to the cases like licensing and planning, yeah, it's common sense to me, and I think Alex is right to mention it, that it makes sense that you have to be there, you have to take part in it, and you can't do that remotely. And, But yeah, but I think the ones that I've seen outlined on pages 420 to 425, 426. I think I'm a bit supportive of, and I think a relatively minor positive adjustments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've read the papers, Alex. I'm not a fan of proxy votes. I think we're elected to be there. That means that we are today to show the public that we're there to raise your concerns and sit around the table. I mean, I'm saying that call it old-fashioned, but that's how we've been brought up. I mean, you've been around a lot longer than I'm council rep. Proxy vote it can be a difficult one because it's what we class as seriousness of somebody having to vote proxy, if that makes sense. Even when we come to full council, we've got to be there in order to get the vote through, and we've got to be showing the public that we do care, we're here to support your needs. So there's certain things that can get round regarding proxy voting. I think we need to be very mindful and very careful of what we do allow to go ahead in proxy voting, because it could come back to bite us. That's my concern.
I agree. I think some of the caveats you've already outlined around it, Alex, are exactly the kind of concerns that I think a lot of us probably have around the proxy voting. But in general, the consultation response, the idea of virtual meetings lending itself to potentially some committees, not all. It seems like it could be a step in first century direction. Yeah, definitely. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I think it gives the council more freedom and flexibility to allow themselves to choose whether they want a virtual or an in-person meeting or both. So.
We'll await the government's response to the consultation with interest.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot for tonight, Alex. Thank you. Just final item, work programme. Been changed since last time. I think we've got just 2 items on the agenda for our meeting of the year, which is around
March the 6th.
March 6th. Thank you, Councillor Atwell. So customer service update and a review of winter support, cost of living support winter. Great. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yes, ma'am.
What?